Well, good morning all and welcome to the Environment Community Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. So I'd like to thank those who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone that is watching via Council's social media channels. Very good morning to CEO Brian Pigeon, General Manager of Environment Community Nick Hauser, to the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, Councillors, also acknowledging Portfolio Lead in Environment Community, Councillor Tim McMahon. Thank you for your continued efforts in this space, and also a very big welcome to Councillor Edwina Farquhar. Welcome to your first committee meeting in some capacity, so congratulations again, and yeah, very welcome and great to have you with us. So great privilege to have your first meeting as the Environment Community Committee, so that's fantastic. Councillors, I would like to as well, before we begin, acknowledge TRC's values of honesty, accountability, respect, teamwork and safety and well-being. And also being the month of September as well, I'd like to give a big congratulations and shout out to everyone involved with the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers. So that's everybody involved in council, that's everybody in our community. That's what makes the event what it is of course is our community and the community that does support it, and we have certainly seen that in the opening few weeks, and it's been wonderful to see so many people out and about and enjoying exactly what we love about our region, and I'm sure it does look spectacular. And as I always say, I think I mentioned certainly to the gardening team and what they do. They do an amazing job to make the gardens look exactly as they are, so a big congratulations to them, and also Nick, through yourself, and of course obviously the staff there, to Paul Reynolds and Kate Scott and everyone that's involved with the coordination of this event. I know it's not an easy one, of course. It's one that takes a lot of time and a lot of extra time that goes in that's not necessarily logged on a timesheet, so thank you for the commitment. I'm sure it's something this community does certainly recognise, so I think it's important to mention that. And the last thing I wanted to mention as well, September is of course carnival time, but it's also a pretty big time in sporting circles with finals. So a shout out to our Southwest Queensland Thunder women's team that has had their best season ever and has qualified for the grand final at Suncorp Stadium on Sunday against Brisbane City. So Brisbane City hasn't lost a game all season. Our girls finished second, so hopefully that changes this weekend. So all the best to our Southwest Queensland Thunder women's team this weekend as well. Council would like to open the meeting as well by acknowledging the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands that we do meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawai peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First People. Councillors, item 2 is attendance, including apologies, leave of absence and declarations of conflict of interest. Now, I note there are no leave of absence to note, so we move past that. So we go to the declarations. Now there are 2 of those, so just the running sheet here. So mine is the first. So councillors, I wish to inform this meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 150 EN of the Local Government Act 2009. So the nature of my interest is as follows. This declarable conflict of interest arises because I have previously been a subcontractor for the Toowoomba Turf Club. I'll be working and have worked in the past as a volunteer master of ceremonies across various events for the Morton Co King of the Mountain and also the Toowoomba Turf Club. And I also host a local radio program which is partly sponsored by the Toowoomba Turf Club. So the Toowoomba Turf Club is an applicant in our community grants item today, which is row 31. So I propose to leave and stay away from the place where the meeting is being held while row 31 is discussed and voted on. And Councillor McDonald? Sorry.
No, Chair, that mine will be for the next committee.
Yeah.
You're right.
My apologies.
You're
Any further conflicts?
Mr. Chair, I have said this before. I just want to mention it again so that it's noted. I'm a member of the Toowoomba Turf Club, have been for quite some time, but I'm not on any financial areas or board or anything like that, and I don't believe I have anything more to gain or lose than anyone else. There's hundreds of members, so thank you.
So we can make note of that. If councillors, if there are any other concerns or conflicts around this, obviously I know as we go into community grants, we're all involved in a lot of different organisations, so if it doesn't come to mind now, feel free, obviously, once we work through them, if there's anyone that wishes to raise any. Are there any at this present time that anyone wishes to put forward in regards to any other conflicts? Or Councillor Summerfield?
Sorry, Councillor James, I just wondered, and I'm just being protective of you, St Mary's Old Boys, that's not a problem for you? Just clarifying, that's all.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. I'm an old boy to the sense that I went to the school and but I'm not a part of the Old Boys or involved in it. But it's a good point. So I'm happy if anyone has any further questions or concerns around that. I'm more than happy to and appreciate that, to be guided either way by council if there is. I'll be honest, I am an old boy. I'm a proud old boy. I proudly say I went to St Mary's. I'll support everything they're involved in, but I'm not actively involved in their Old Boys Association or have any involvement in that way. So
Thanks for clarifying. I just thought I was just
yeah, no,
looking out for you, brother.
Appreciate it, sister. Councillor Shine.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. Just want your ruling on this, but as I understood it, it's fairly clear that unless you're a member of the executive, basically of an organisation, you don't have to declare. Because many of us are life members, patrons, ordinary members of all sorts of organisations. We'll be here all morning if we have to do that.
Yeah, I think Brian, you may wish to. Sorry, CMS wish to add to this, but I think what you pointed out, Councillor Shine, is correct to the thing. But I think we all know when we're involved in situations here where whether it's a declarable conflict of interest or it's a perceived conflict of interest. So if there's feeling around that, and to the example with myself with St Mary's, I appreciate that sort of being brought forward. So yes, I'm not involved in it, but I don't think it's where people are comfortable. So if people wish to feel the need to raise it, I think that's but yes, to the actual letter of how it's written, unless you are on the executive, you don't have a conflict. Do you have anything else you wanted to add to that, Mr. CEO?
No, it's quite clear. Unless you're actually on the executive, the managing committee of those particular associations or organisations, under those circumstances, you'd have to declare the interest. But if you're just an ordinary member, you wouldn't even need to declare those. Otherwise, we'll be here all day declaring interests, and that's quite clear in the legislation.
Comfortable with that, Councillor Shine? Yes. Councillor Von Hoff?
Thank you, Chair. To your point about the real or perceived, I guess the question then for you, with your connections to St Mary's, is do you feel that you can impartially consider the matter before us?
Thanks, Councillor Von Hoff. Yes, I feel like it. Yes, in my own heart and mind, yes, I believe I can.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move that you don't have a conflict and can participate and stay in the room.
So moved by Councillor Von Hoff. So Councillor Taylor, you're happy to second that? Yeah. So I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Right, so that's carried. I'll just let Wendy. We're good. So yeah, if there are no further conflicts to be raised at this point, councillors, we will move forward. But again, as I said, when we work through it, if anything arises, definitely we will have that opportunity to come forward with that. So we go to item 3 on the agenda. So it is the proposed lease to the Toowoomba Women's Shed. Chris Theodosis is the author of this report, and Hugh Dunn, Manager of Property Services. So I'll hand across to Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Council. This item we have before us is a proposed lease, as the Chair said, to the Pittsworth branch of the Toowoomba Women's Shed at the Pittsworth Pioneer Village. I note we have the author, Chris Theodosis, here to answer any questions, and also acknowledge the asset owner, the manager, Library and Cultural Services, Tani Pierce, also in the room. So happy to have the report, take the report as read and answer any questions.
Thanks, Hugh. Any questions, councillors, in regards to this item? Councillor McMahon.
If there are no one else, thank you, Hugh and team, for your work. I just wanted to talk through, I think Mr. Sale's proposal is great. It's good to see him getting involved in a community like that. We have been through a similar process with John Darien and Pioneer Village in Pittsworth, where we had all of these new buildings either being built or being put there, and in a number of years it became a problem to us, right? And that's the case in John Darien. And I was under the impression that similarly to John Darien at Pittsworth Pioneer Village, council had it somewhere on their books that there were no new buildings or structures. And I just wanted to clarify if that exists or whether that's just an idea.
Sorry, through you, Chair. That's not my understanding, Councillor Tim. There was a master plan adopted by council a couple of years ago that was prepared in-house that did actually identify new buildings. And I think in the report, if you'll indulge me, there was discussion with both the author of the report. There is the master plan for the historical village is produced in the report. I don't have attachment 3. And the discussion with the village, led by the manager, Library and Cultural Services, was there was a proposal when the master plan was developed for an historic church to be relocated to the site, and the management committee have agreed that that will not proceed and that will be the general location for this shed. So that's the proposal that there was to be no buildings moved there is not the case.
Yeah, thanks. I'm aware of the report. I just thought there was some other idea. Thanks for the clarification. And as I said, Chair, I completely applaud Mr. Saul for his work in getting this happening. And Chair, I'd be happy to move at the appropriate time. Thank you.
So I've got a mover. I'll just hold. I've just got another few other questions. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Carol
Just
Taylor.
a question. I think it's a wonderful proposal, and all the buildings that are there are being well used with the men's shed, whatever. Just a question, I suppose, going forward. Most showgrounds that are owned by the society or whatever, if you put a building on there, in the future, if that group disbands or becomes no longer relevant to there, does it then become the property of council? Because that's probably what should happen, because it's been built by Mr. Sale. It's wonderful. He's putting the money into it, but it's for community use, I guess. And the women's shed, often not recognised as being, such a contributor to our community. And I think it's wonderful for them to be their tenants. But it's just a question going forward, say 10, 20, whatever. Does that building then revert back to the ownership of the council? Thanks.
We'll just ask Chris Theodosis to answer that. Good morning, Chris.
Yes, through you. Under the terms of the lease, yes, if there's a termination due to the end of the group that's leasing it, the improvements remain on the property with and become council's property. And yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Are there any further questions, Mayor McDonald?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, if I could, Chair, in regard to the generous donation by Mr. Trevor Saul in memory of his loving wife of 72 years, Pearl. And I think that's it's a great gesture, and obviously means a lot to both Trevor and the family. But particularly wanted to comment on the process that allows this to happen. And sometimes it's frustrating for community organisations and individuals to work through this process. I'm sure I'm not the only councillor that's had a phone call in regard to this, but I just wanted to express my gratitude to the Property Services for actually working with the committee group, to work through the necessary approvals and processes to get to this point. I know there's a bit more to go, but to get to this point, I think it does give confidence that we have a duty of care for the broader community to make sure we get it right here, but also to encourage those wonderful people in our community that want to give this sort of gesture. So, Chair, I just wanted to mention that publicly, particularly around Mr. Saul and the generous donation that he's providing to the community. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. If any further questions on regards to this? Well, if there are no further questions, I have a recommendation. I have a mover in Councillor McMahon. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Melissa Taylor. And I will just quick before we go to the vote, probably just echoing the words that you said before, Mayor, and in particularly obviously to Hugh and his team and Tani down the back. They've done a great job working with that group out there, because just getting through the processes of making it happen. And it also, just to the point before with the question that Councillor McMahon asked, it shows the importance of having that master plan there, which is a process that this group went through a few years ago, which made the transition of being able to place this building in its appropriateness and how it fit in with everything there to work. So thank you for everyone involved with that. But I have a mover and a, did I get a second? Sorry, I did, sorry, apologies. Councillor Melissa, sorry, secondary Councillor Melissa. I put it to the vote. Those in favour? It's carried. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, you. Councillors, we move to item number 4. So this is our community grants. So again, just with the, as we work through this, so with the conflict that I've raised and I'll step out for, so we will vote on that one separately, but we'll work through the process here in terms of if there are any other questions, obviously, and any other amendments or anything that need to be made. But when we get to that point, that is one that will, at this point, 31, that will be removed. So I'll hand across. So this one headed up by Eddie. So we'll hand across to you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Good morning, councillors. Applications for the 23-24 Community Grants Program for round 1 have closed on the 1st of August. With the grants program, we talk of a combined program of 7 funding programs. The budget for that is $724,600. And when we talk of the 7 programs, we are referring to sport and recreation, event support, sports tourism, community economic development, environment, cultural and arts support, and the Community Support Grant Program. With the applications received for round 1, there were 78. Now, 7 of those were deemed ineligible and they did not meet the minimum criteria for that respective program. It means that 71 were then made available for assessment, and that's through the relevant approved grant program assessment panels. Those 7 grant assessment panels were convened in accordance with policy and relevant program guidelines, and the assessment panels have recommended 55 applications totalling $342,884.84. That's the ones to be approved, and 16 applications not be approved for August round 1 community grants program. Perhaps through Mr. Chair, it might be appropriate that if there are questions from councillors, that we do this in the 7 programs. If we did it, as we mentioned, 7 programs to go through, would that be fair, Mr. Chair? If we looked at questions in that way per program?
Sure. So if you want to go through the different programs, so I know we did have a briefing and an info session on this, but I know if you were away, so we'll work. So if you want to work through whichever order, you've got them in front of you, Eddie. So councillors, if there are questions in those certain areas, we can do it that way. So what are we looking at?
Mr. Chair, through you, we could go through as per the report. If you have a look on the table, the assessment panel's recommendation, we start with sport and recreation with the list that follows in that way. So our subject matter experts are here in the room, and if there is a question pertaining to those various programs, we could ask the subject matter expert to come to the front.
So councillor, this is on 1 to 11 of the report as well. Councillor Von Hoff?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Eddie. Probably no surprise. I'm looking at line item number 5. This is the St Mary's Old Boys Association. The request for funding was just shy of $140,000 and the recommended funding is $117,000. And I have the grant guidelines up in front of us here. They start on page 189 of board books. I guess my first question with this one, because it is a considerable amount of money, we have a description here about what that $117,000 would potentially be used for. And the program guidelines talk about benefit to the community. So when we are looking at the basketball, volleyball, pickleball, etc., squash, the work that's going to be done on that, my question is, who from the community actually uses those facilities? Is it the school or is it bigger than the school?
Thanks, councillor. So that application included detail of and one of the clear requirements is for the wider community benefit, and we have a number. So actual Toowoomba Basketball Association are based out of the centre there, and then there's the additional community groups and other sports it uses as well. So it's not just for the school; it has those wider benefits as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Vonhoff. That's all you had at this stage, Rebecca. Sorry to cut you off. Yes, I'll take. Apologies.
For now. There
Yeah,
might
sorry.
be. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. I was also interested in the St Mary's one versus the Glennie one in number 2. Does Glennie allow other community people to use those tennis courts, or is it for the school only?
Yeah, so that was the
Strictly.
clear difference between those two. Was the St Mary's one had that wider community benefit, where the Glennie one was to resurface their courts, which are just for school use only.
And they made that clear in the application.
Yeah, it was
did
in
they?
the application that it wasn't a wider community use of the facility.
Thank you. So then if we could just go to number 11, which is the Church of Christ, Toowoomba, Humeridge Church, Gymnasium. That too, I thought the community, there was wider use of that in the community. It says in the comments, not recommended for funding, community benefit of the project not clearly articulated. There are always functions at the Humeridge Church for all sorts of reasons, and I just wondered, was clarity sought in relation to that or not?
We weren't able to because the submission was received so late. So what we will be doing is once the decisions are made, our grant officers will go back to the group and encourage them to reapply in the next round. The actual application probably wasn't well written and didn't display a clear community benefit and outline clearly how it would benefit the wider community. So that'll be some advice we'll go back to the group with.
Okay, thanks. That'd be really helpful to have that in the commentary then too, because that ensures that it actually does occur.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Summerfield. Any further, Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Not a question, but just a comment, and I'm sure councillors are aware that with the St Mary's application, they propose squash courts, whereas the existing Toowoomba Squash Club will have no venue once their courts are closed up in James Street. So that's another, it's having a resurgence squash. So there's actually no home for them at the moment. And, that would be to have publicly available squash courts back in the city is probably a big plus as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Are there any further questions in this round? Yep, Councillor Vonhoff.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies. I thought there were going to be others on that particular item, so I left this one. It's just in relation to row item 6, and this is the full funding that's been recommended just shy of $17,000 for the Crow's Nest Golf Club for some tree removal, hazardous trees to be cut and mulched, and some that need to be removed entirely. My question is about replanting. So there's going to be 45 pine trees removed, 18 gum trees pruned. Are there any plans to replant trees now that those ones are going to be going?
We're unaware of them, so that funding was conditioned on them receiving an arborist to undertake a tree risk hazard assessment, so to look at which trees actually needed to be removed and which could remain, but there was no indication whether those trees would be replaced with any other plantings, no.
It'd be great if the Crow's Nest Golf Club would consider that.
Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Vonhoff. Are there any further questions on this particular round? Okay, thanks, Daniel. Eddie is our next category. So our next one is, I'm sorry, Eddie.
Mr Chair, through you, the category we'll now focus on is event support, which takes into account community events, major events and regional events, and our subject matter expert is here with us today to answer any questions.
So councillors, that's rows 12 to 28. Are there any questions in regard to any of these? No. Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Not a question, just a comment from this on that there are some areas of our Toowoomba Regional Council area that aren't and haven't been applying for anything, and I'd ask again, do our CDOs get out there in those areas and make them aware of the availability of these grants and encourage them to actually put in for them, because I see multiple from different areas and nothing from some, and there hasn't been for quite some time. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. As outlined, Councillor Taylor, in the report, we promote these activities or these opportunities through Council's website, the My Community Directory, social media, video promotion, as well as face-to-face community information sessions around the region. So there's plenty of opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr Reynolds. I understand that, but it's face-to-face in these small communities that's most important, and run by volunteers, as we all understand. So sometimes just need that little bit of help now that everything's digital, and some people don't have those skills. So I'm very acutely aware that in some cases that's the roadblock here, and I know that it's a lot of extra work in a busy work day, but I'd just like that to be considered. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Summerfield?
Thank you, Chair. I'd support Councillor Carroll in what she just said, because I note there's only 2 applications for the environmental grants, and I know a lot of our land care groups out there do amazing work which assists council. They often do work that council would otherwise have to do, and I think that there is opportunity for us to push further and try and ensure that everybody is front of mind to understand when they're open and when they're closed as much as anything, because if they know it's open, they'll get in and apply. So I do think we need to keep promoting that. Item number 16, the Lions Club of Millmerran. It says that it's recommended for approval, $1,345, but it also says in the commentary that applicant requested funding be allocated towards the purchase or catering equipment on behalf of the Millmerran Show Society, which contravenes the event support grant guidelines. So I'm just wondering why we're approving it if it contravenes. Thank you.
So, whilst that particular element does contravene the event support guidelines, they had other elements within their application and outlined within their budget that we can put towards the event itself to help support the event in terms of catering requirements, in terms of food and drinks, venue hire, entertainment, MC costs, those sorts of elements, which actually align with your guidelines.
If there are any further questions in regards to this particular item? No? Thanks, Kira. All the best this weekend and the rest of the month.
Thank you.
We go, oh, sorry, I'm stealing your lines, Eddie.
Mr Chair, that's all right. Sports tourism is our next program that we'll focus on. Councillors, if you have a question, we do have our subject matter expert here to enlighten you on those applications.
So this is 33 to 35 councillors of the report. Is that right? Sorry, or board books? Okay. Lines, sorry, yeah. Items 33 to 35. Apologies. But any questions, sorry, around these items? No? Okay. Well done, Andrew. Back to you, Eddie.
Mr Chair, following on in our report, pages 36 to 38, confirm the Community Economic Development grant applications, and our subject matter expert is here too.
So this is items 36 to 38. Any questions in regards to these? It's page 41 of board books. Okay, no? Everyone's happy? We can move forward. Eddie?
Mr Chair, on to the environment grants, pages 39 to 40.
So yeah, so it's line items 39 and 40, which falls on page 42 of board books. Any questions, councillors, in regards to this particular category? Going. All right.
Mr Chair, cultural and arts support, I'll get that right, rose 41 to 43.
Which is also page 43 on board books. Any questions in these particular items, councillors, in regards to the recommendations in this section of the grants? Next.
Mr Chair, rose 44 to 71 covers the community support grant program.
So that's starting from page 44 on board books. Councillors, any questions in regards to this line, to these items here? Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. Item 55, the Southbrook Sports Club. It says lack of supporting documentation for this application and therefore application not recommended. Were they followed up at all? Hi, Daryl.
That application, no. Again, similar to Daniel's, the time we got it wasn't, but it will be in the feedback for it. They didn't provide some quotes around what they were going to do, who uses the facility, those kind of questions. So part of the stuff, and yeah, maybe it would be better to include those comments, but we have a certain size for it. But we'll go back to them and then work with them to get another application in for round 2.
That'd be great. And the reason why I asked was Southbrook Sports Club. I mean, Southbrook probably doesn't get all that much from Toowoomba Regional Council. Really, they're a very small community, so it'd be great if we could support them in some way or another.
And I think from an officer point of view, and I know it was asked by a couple of councillors, we do that as a standard, but it's probably worth noting in the reports that come back to council that we do those. So if they're unsuccessful, we don't just leave them. Across the board, we'll go back, have those conversations, and I think at the workshop with councillors, we talked about not only half actually come to us to have a conversation in the first bit, and if they did, we could help them get it across the line. So really reinforcing those to applicants as well.
Yeah, it's probably time on both sides. So the next one was the number 56. It says it wasn't approved due to the project had already started, but we've approved funding for events and also, and I know this isn't events, but events and all sorts of things previously that have already actually happened or in the process of happening at that time. So I just wondered whether that was consistent with our decision making.
It is in the guidelines. Sorry, Councillor Nancy. So events do have a retrospective as long as that event falls within the time frame of the funding program. Okay. But community support, we don't fund retrospective. So they've already purchased the equipment that they wanted for that. So our feedback would be, great project. They do in the project itself, and councillors would have read the description, it's an amazing community-based program, but they'd already purchased it. So therefore we can't fund it.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Summerfield. Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, and firstly, apologies, Paul, for not recognising you earlier in my question. In my line of sight, Councillor Taylor blocked you. I apologise. Daryl, thank you for this. Line item 58, this is the Renew Australia grant, and it's recommended that it not be funded for the requested $2,100. And the justification for that is that accommodation is not eligible under the program guidelines. I read this application as 2 days of workshops, and if part of the application was to accommodate people for that night in between, that may be the case. But was there also workshop costs that were considered in this funding? Because there is community benefit, obviously, when we're talking about energy efficient housing.
For that application, sorry, Councillor Brecker, we reviewed it based on, it was ineligible because of accommodation, but yes, there were some clear benefits around the community side of it and training people around that renewable energy side. So our feedback going back would be to withdraw those elements. We didn't fund it this round, but the feedback would be to withdraw those elements, come back with a funding application that takes consideration of those for a round 2 application.
Okay, because they didn't line item it out. Okay, thank you, and thanks for going back to them. One more, if I might, Mr. Chair. Line item 64. This is the Wattles Rugby League Football Club. Again, funding hasn't been recommended. They requested $2,500 for a wall-mounted defib. And then the justification for not funding is that the program doesn't fund equipment that has a short life or needs regular replacement. My question is, how often do we need to replace a defib? Because there's a bit of subjectivity there about what is a short life.
Yeah, again, this has been consistent with us not funding over the years, and it's one the assessment panel took on board. There is the battery and the process around those ones that we felt if it was the benefit back to that group to fund, and there is other funding applications. So what we do, and we've done over the last couple of years, or 3 or 4 years now, is provide other opportunities of where they could get that funding from. But yeah, the assessment panel felt because of the shelf life and the ongoing maintenance of those, we wouldn't fund it.
And Daryl, do you know what the shelf life is?
No, off the top of my head, no, sorry.
Okay. I'd be grateful. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
2 years?
Yeah, 2 years.
2 years.
I suppose, Councillor Beckett, it's been a consistency for the assessment panel, like we
Yeah,
haven't,
I know.
and councillors remember.
I've raised defibs before.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I've been successful. Probably not. But thank you. Thanks, Daryl.
Thanks, Councillor Von Hoff. Are there any further questions in this category? No, Daryl's left, so he thinks he's done. No, thank you, Daryl. Is that a hint?
Mr. Chair, through you, thank you, councillors, for your input questions related to the 7 funding programs. I guess if we look at page 2 of the report, the recommendations are there, items 1, 2 and 3 in particular. It is of benefit to discuss the need for that in relation to the 23-24 Community Grants program and funding for round 2, Council depart from the current requirements of 2.59, the Community Grants Policy, section 4.3, and delegate approval of grant applications for round 2 to be to the Chief Executive Officer. Now, the reasons for that in line with the March 24 local elections.
So, councillors, that's the same format we followed 4 years ago, just from a timing point of view and consistency with it. But does anyone have any questions around that element of the recommendation? No? Okay. So, well, if there are no... Councillor Summerfield?
Chair, I didn't want to question about that, but I did want to do a general question, if I could, over all of the grants, and that is, I note in there that one organisation has applied for 4 different grants in this particular round, and I also note that, you know, quite a bit of that funding has been used, and in particular the community support, but all of them, and I just wonder, do we monitor, and is there any sort of policy guidelines or restrictions around too many applications by one particular organisation? And I'm not picking on an organisation, I just see this as a potential concern for us as a council, insofar as if we have round 1 and we get a lot of applications from, multiple applications from one group, that robs opportunity for other groups to apply for, particularly in round 2. And I just wonder whether that's something that we need to be considering moving forward. It's just something I've not seen before, and it's interesting that it's not only 2 or 3, but actually 4 in this round. So I just wonder whether we do have something in the policy, whether we need to look at the policy, or whether everyone's very comfortable with that, I guess.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Councillor, there is no current restriction on the number of applications that can be made within a given round or a given year by an applicant. We did mention in the information session a few weeks back that we're currently in the process of loading or working towards loading 5 years of historical data into the Smarty Grant system as well, so we can actually look longitudinally around whether there's an issue around financial dependency around some of these things. So that's a body of work in progress at the moment. And I guess the extension of that, typically when we get to the end of financial year, we tend not to be oversubscribed financially in terms of the whole scheme. But the direct answer to your question is there's no current policy restriction in terms of the number of applications by a particular applicant in a round or within a year.
So I just wonder, how could we investigate that further? Or if there is even an appetite to investigate it further, whether there could be an amendment to the policy, because potentially we could get another 4 applications from the same group or a different group for that matter. I'm not targeting this group. It's just a matter of fact here that we're dealing with today. That could potentially happen again. And we've got so many groups out there and they're all entitled to a share. And I just worry about the equality, I guess. And I don't know how we advance reviewing that, whether staff could come back with an amendment to the policy, do a bit of work on that, or whether, you know, maybe councillors aren't interested and happy to just leave it as it is. I don't know.
Look, where there are multiple applications coming through from the same organisation, they are for different types of requests or different projects or activities. They're not applying under multiple schemes for exactly the same thing. My preference would be to hold fire until we have a look at the 5 years of historical information and see what that analytics actually tells us. It may paint a very different picture, but until we undertake that work or complete that work, we may well be clutching at straws.
Happy to do that, Paul. I think it'll be interesting to see that. But before us today, we have 4 applications by one group across our grants. So that's actually a stat right there that I'm referring to. It's not the historical data of how many times anyone's applied over the years. I think they're 2 different things. And I just think that it's something that we should be considering.
Morning, councillors. I just wanted to make a comment, and thanks for the discussion and the thoughts there. If the concern is that we're funding some organisations and others are missing out as a result of that, I don't think history tells us that that's what happens. As Paul mentioned before, we don't typically expend all of the funding across all of the programs every year. So when we get to round 2, we've got that capacity to do the moderation and move funding between programs with council's approval, if that's the case. So if the concern is that some other groups might be missing out at the expense of those getting a bigger bite of the pie, I don't think that's the case, and we've got the capacity. If we do the additional work, we'll be more informed to make policy decisions at some point in the future.
Thanks, Nick. And that also comes back to the other issue that was raised earlier, and that is making sure that people are aware that the grants are open so that we do get multiple applications for funding across the whole sector, the whole region, and making sure that everybody gets a bite at the apple.
Well, probably just the extension of that, the analytics will also identify the gaps where we're not seeing applications geographically. So it's not just necessarily about who is applying on a consistent basis, but it's also about identifying specific locations that aren't actually making application in the first place.
I was going to add something too, but it's also from my team's perspective, those who are applying and not getting funded, and not coming to offices. So we'll do that body of work with that information and go back to them to say, yeah, give them that feedback around it. You can't go retrospective. So from a regional CD team perspective, the onus is on working with those groups who didn't to get them to a point where they do. Sorry.
I think just picking up on that point that's been raised, there's probably that opportunity because I agree, they're probably 2 separate things. So in terms of how and who applies and how long of that period of time, that'll be a good body of work, I think, for us to understand and see what sits there. But probably if there is support for it to be investigated around the table, I suppose, is if we, whilst that work's being done, if we then even look at the policy and if there potentially is a desire around looking at an this is, as I said, moving forward, to tweak that to have a cap, if you will, on how many applications a group can make or something. That's another conversation we can probably have as a part of this body of work that, Paul, would you say is being done or will be done? That is being done. It's happening now. So it might be that opportunity to, if there is a desire to do so. It's probably not, doesn't need a decision as such today, but a commitment that moving forward we do that. Does anyone differ from that? Happy to look at that in that capacity? Well, I was just saying, so with the work that's being done at the moment that Paul mentioned around, the piece of that 5-year data of who's applied and who's received applicants, where those gaps are that we aren't receiving applications, so that's what's being done. But as a part of that conversation, or when that comes back to council, I think there's an opportunity where council can look at this conversation that Councillor Summerfield has raised here around, is there a desire around, if cap's the right word, on the amount of applications an organisation can make, whether it be in a calendar year or around or 2 years or whatever it may be, is probably what I'm suggesting. So I might, sorry, yeah, Paul?
Yeah. Under the existing policy, I think it's 2.59, the overarching policy, there is a requirement for an annual review. So we'll certainly take that on board and come back and consider that as part of the annual review.
Thanks, Paul. So sorry, just while someone that thought, sorry, Councillor, sorry, I just
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
sorry, if I could just, sorry, Councillor Summerfield, sorry, is that, sorry, Carol, I mean, it's just, cut you off there before. So just in terms of where we sat with that, is that sort of where you're leading or what your thoughts were in regards to?
Yeah, thanks, James. I really appreciate you taking that on, because I felt like it was getting lost, and so I really appreciate you bringing that forward just then, like you did. And if that can be considered, that CAP be looked at as part of that review, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Summerfield. Sorry,
And thank you,
Councillor
Mr.
Carroll.
Chair. My comments around the 5-year review, and as an elected member sitting around this table since 2008, and certainly since it's gone digital, I can tell you the areas where nothing has happened, and that's not the fault of the staff. It's the fault of the fact that we've gone digital and they just don't understand and they might need. So I'm hopeful that when that comes back and those areas are identified and those organisations that sit there might be able to be given a helping hand, at least to familiarise them with what is what's available, what's needed, and how they can be helped to apply for that. And I think that'll be quite stark when we get that 5-year review. And after all these, and you can see people who've got the capacity and know what to do, they're quite confident and they're back here, and good on them. They're back here time after time. But then there's other areas that are actually missing out, and dare I say it, they were covered by the councils that used to sit there. So at the end of the day, it's for everyone, and I'd like to be confident that we can make sure that everyone believes that they can, that they're able to apply for that. Should they need help, they'll have it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. I appreciate your words, and I think they're very valid, but at the same time I also want to say I've seen and witnessed and know the volume of work and the time that staff put into and the opportunity they provide for every group, every person, anybody that wants to apply for a grant at any part of our region at any time of the year have been above and beyond in my capacity. There is that opportunity where, like, all these things take time with change. So I think if we work together, and we have a role to play in it as well, being in the community to help and point people, if we know community groups we think are struggling to fill out the form, to put them in touch with our staff. But I do think that that in my opinion, that the staff have done a great job and will continue to do a great job with that. And I think there's that opportunity where, as you've mentioned, Carol, that opportunity to provide just more opportunities, and that's what it comes down to.
Mr. Chair, if I might say, my comments aren't aimed at the staff. It's just pointing out the actual deficiency that's there in the community, and they do need help, extra help. Absolutely nothing about staff, and I do understand being one of the people who have sat on those previous committees, but there are areas, and personally I can point them out. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. good discussion. I suppose I wanted to pick up on Councillor Nancy's point. I absolutely agree that if we zoom out and have a look at over the X amount, 5 or 6 years, and look at things like dependency, but then we come back to the here and now, and when you look at our table 2 in the report, you know, most of those ones, we're sitting at roughly where we should be, half of the amount gone, and I think last year was an anomaly in the fact that we got to the end of the year and we had a heck of a lot of money left over that wasn't allocated to any grants, and then it goes back into, you know, consolidated revenue. So if there was a group that was doing some really great things in the community, I'd be happy to let them do that in 3 or 4 different ways. But may I just make a comment as well, Chair? Someone who's fairly involved in this, if I may, it's not a question. That if you're a community group, one of the many thousand obviously listening online, the best way to get your grant to happen is to talk to our team, our community development officer or our grants team before you put in the grant, and have that conversation, and they can guide you with the best grant panel to go under, how to make it work. And I do believe it's quite common when the grant says, have you talked with the council officer, and they tick the box, but they haven't actually. So the best way to get your grant across is to work with council and the council officer team. If you can only play the cards you're given, we can only approve or not the ones that are submitted. So if you're a community group, absolutely talk to council, and I look forward to seeing your grant in the future.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. It may be an opportunity that can be that's our challenge, or sort of if we can, any of the amount of community groups that we're involved in that we think that should be applying for grants to help, a word or a point in the right direction might hopefully help. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just out of curiosity, do we still do the grant application workshops, helping people to, how often are they done? And are they done out in the regions as well?
Mr. Chair, through you, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, yes, they are happening, and they do happen at least once a year, if not twice a year. That particular workshop is designed to get as many people as possible familiar with all of the 7 programs or the available grants and guide them through. And specifically in the last 12 months or 18 months, the focus has been the transition from the paper-based documents to online. So that incorporates understanding the need for username and password, and then the familiarity with the system. But short answer to the question, yes. And those are done regionally, and they rotate in regional areas. And we also include a community group, or give the opportunity for a community group to do the catering for that.
Thanks, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan. Councillor Carl.
Notwithstanding giving Councillor Tim the opportunity to move the recommendation, I'm either happy to move it or second it as per the report, and particularly given the officer's undertaking to let's roll through the annual review as stated in the policy and look at that additional information then.
Thanks, Councillor Carl. So you've given a leg up to Councillor McMahon if he wanted to move it. I've got a few. Are you?
Yeah, do I have to move it to Sans 1?
Yeah, there'll be a couple of that. I'll explain that process, but sorry, I just skipped through that. But as I said, if Councillor Summerfield, do you have a further question? Oh, so once, so I'll come back to the state of play as where it sits after that. So, Councillor, anyone else have any other further questions? Councillor Melissa or Councillor Kerry, Mayor, everyone's comfortable with where we sit? Satisfied? Okay, so Councillor, so when we get, we've got to move in a second, and what it will be all items with the exception of row 5. Now, row 5 is St Mary's Old Boys, so that does need to be voted on separately because a conflict of interest was raised, so votes are recorded. And 31, and row 31, I will leave the building, and Councillor McMahon will assume the chair for the vote of that. So, you want me to do 31? So I should just read what you... Sorry, Wendy. So we'll do... I'll scrap that. We're going to do... Row 30, we're going to vote on row 31 separately first, correct? Okay, so whilst Councillor McMahon is coming up, so I'll vacate the seat with that. I will just quickly add, as I said, I want to thank councillors and thank the staff. As we know, we're changing in this process of how it's done. Eddie and the team have provided more information than we've ever had before, and I know that takes a fair bit to put together, so I appreciate sort of the work that goes into that. But also to my colleagues, it's a changing pace. We want to see as many people applying for these. We've got a desire that they go to community groups, trying to find the best way that it can be done, and appreciate obviously everyone's patience on the journey as we go. But we are, it's, as I said, each one that we've gone through, I think we're getting closer and closer to the outcome where we want. So with those few words, I'll remove myself, and Councillor McMahon can assume the seat for item 31.
Fell off his chair. Colleagues, we have row number 31, the recommendation that Council approve the application for funding to Toowoomba Turf Club under the Community Grants Policy and Associated. Is there any questions on that? Question, Councillor Von Hoff.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question about some of the commentary in the recommendations, the panel's reason for recommendation. And specifically it says, while scoring matrix supports part funding for the event, the panel made a unanimous decision to fully fund the event for the 9% of event expenses to the value of $50,445. And that wasn't, that didn't make sense to me, so I'm after just a little bit more clarity, please, through you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Von Hoff. Officers, I will take your lead. Thank you.
Thank you. Give me a second to just read my notes, sorry. This was for line 31.
That's right, line 31. So specifically, it seems like there was, following the matrix, there was a score that was arrived at, but then the panel made a decision that overrode that scoring to unanimously decide to fully fund the event.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused because I've got row 31 as the Brimaroo Easter Saturday Rodeo and line 30 as the Turf Club.
Line 31 is the Toowoomba Turf Club in our documents.
The Turf Club will actually be fully funded. There must have been an error in the commentary and I do apologise for that, but it is a fully funded event.
No, that's my question. So it is fully funded, but
yes.
The commentary says that the panel assessed the application and they used the matrix to assess that application as we do with all of the applications. And at the end of looking at that application through the lens of the matrix, there was a score arrived at. But after that, the panel made a decision that overrode the score that was arrived at with that matrix to fully fund. So the matrix said don't fully fund it, but then the panel said, well, no, for reasons that aren't included here, we are. And so I'm asking, what are those reasons?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was a bit confused there. So we have a 20% of the total cash expenditure to which applicants can apply for. So that's the maximum under the major regional tier, under the event support grant that they can apply for. So the Toowoomba Turf Club have actually only requested 9% of that total cash expenditure, which is, whilst they've asked for that 9%, that's that $50,000 odd that they're asking for. So that's part of their full funding. So we're not giving them any more than what they've actually equated for or requested in their application.
That's not. Thank you for that, but maybe I'm not making myself particularly clear. My reading of this is that they have asked for $50,445.
Correct. Yes.
And then the panel took that application, used the matrix, and came up with a part funding conclusion, but said, despite that, we're going to go outside the matrix guidelines to give them more.
I don't know how else to explain this, sorry. I'm struggling with this one. So, yes, they've gone with the matrix, they've followed the matrix guidelines, which, and I guess it's a confusion on maybe the panel's decision. So they're saying it's part funding because it's only 9% of the 20% matrix to which they can apply for. So they're saying that it's partial funding of the full 20% that which they could apply for. So the 20% could be more than the 50,000. So they're saying that's the full amount to which they can apply as the 20% matrix. So technically it's partial funding because it's not the full 20%, it's only 9% of the matrix. I don't know if that makes it any clearer.
Kira, did the idea that we have a matrix that you work to,
Yes.
and then someone has gone outside that matrix, I think what Councillor Von Hoff is asking, has that happened?
No.
Or you're saying the matrix supports up to 20%?
The matrix supports up to 20% and they've actually applied for only up to 9% of that matrix.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
We got there. Well done, Kira, thank you. So, colleagues, any further questions on row 31? In the absence of Councillor O'Shea, who has left the room for a conflict, can I put the recommendation that Council approve the application for the Toowoomba Turf Club under the overarching 2.59 Community Grants Policy, moved by Mayor McDonald. Do I have a seconder for that? Bill? Any debate? All those in favour? Decision is passed unanimously. Thank you very much. I'll vacate the chair if we could invite Councillor O'Shea back in.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. So, councillors, the committee recommendation number 2 is before us. The council approve the application for funding by St Mary's Old Boys Association under the overarching community grants policy and associated guidelines as recommended, and that the applicant be advised accordingly. I've moved by Councillor McMahon, seconded by Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan. Does anyone wish to go into debate? Those in favour? So it's carried unanimously. So, councillors, we go to the remainder of the recommendation for this item. So, it is the council approve the applications for funding under the overarching community grants policy and associated guidelines as recommended, and that these applicants be advised accordingly, that the ineligible and unsuccessful applicants for funding under the overarching policy and associated guidelines be advised accordingly, but also, as we touched on, and also be assisted in making future grants, and that in relation to the 23-24 Community Grants Program funding round 2, council depart from the current requirements and delegate approval of grant applications to the CEO. Now, that was moved earlier just from memory by Councillor McMahon, seconded by Councillor Carl. Does anyone wish to go into debate? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Eddie. Thank you to all staff for being with us today. Councillors, we have one other item in Environment Community. Are you comfortable for us to proceed, and we can break at the conclusion of Environment Community? Everyone's comfortable with that? So, item 5, councillors, is the approved systematic inspection program for dog registration, dog microchipping and cat microchipping, and approved selective inspection program of places in Toowoomba Regional Council area where declared dangerous dogs and declared menacing dogs are kept. So we've got Kevin Jeffries, Jason Crowther with us here, so hand over directly to Kevin. Morning, Kevin.
Morning, Chair, morning, councillors. This is a standard report that we've presented to Council for a number of years now. In the last couple of years, we've included a selective program as well to do the inspections of the declared dogs, that's menacing and dangerous dogs, and we do that by visiting every property where there is a declared dog living. I have to say that's been very productive in ensuring that people are meeting conditions of having a declared dog. We found a high percentage of people weren't complying with the conditions for a number of reasons, but the fact that we visited every property, spoke to those people, and in some cases we had to take some actions, was very productive. The other part of it is, as the Chair said, it's about registration and microchipping of dogs and cats, and we do that. And this year we have struggled in the past to be able to do extensive areas because of lack of staff. I'm pleased to advise this year we are only down on by one staff member, which we're advertising right now for. So we're in the best position we've ever been to be able to incorporate that. And as we do inspections of different areas and different townships, it's interesting to see the number of registrations start to increase simply because of that word of mouth. So it does take a lot of time, but it does have its benefits, and it allows us to enter properties without notice to the occupier. Not houses, but their properties for that program.
Thanks, Kevin. Councillors, any questions in regards to this item? Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a standard, of course, but I do worry about the sensitivity of it, you know, going into people's yards and things like that. And I just wonder, do we do training, particularly for newer staff, to ensure that they're very sensitive and respectful of people's, you know, at the end of the day, their home is their castle, and making sure that their property is as respected as owners of it?
Absolutely. All of the officers, and particularly new officers, there's a training regime that we have for them. So a lot of it, they are buddied up to start with. Even with this inspection program, we would not have one officer out by themselves. I mean, we've got health and safety issues to be aware of as well for those staff. And yes, we are very sensitive, not just for this inspection program, but whenever staff are entering people's private properties with their approval or under a warrant or whatever it may be, that is their property, and we do take that on board, and this is part of our training around customer service and all those sort of things.
Thanks, Councillor Summerfield. Councillor Carl, question or no?
Just happy to move.
Okay, well, I'll hold, so I've got a mover, but I'll hold with a couple of other questions at Councillor McMahon. You're passing the baton, Councillor Shine.
Okay, just on that last point, Kevin, I think you said with their approval, that was sort of inconsistent with my hearing of what I thought I heard you say earlier, that you can come without notice. But
Sorry to confuse you. I was talking about in general terms when officers, for other reasons outside of this inspection program, have to enter private property. We normally have to have the approval of the property owner to stay on the property. Otherwise, we have to get a warrant from the court, from the magistrate's court. In this case, and that's why we are putting this report up to council, it allows us to do the inspection program without, we can do it without the approval of the occupier owner of that property.
just on it, because I know of an instance where a person has a disability and is very anxious about anyone who comes onto the property, because particularly in the light of the crime statistics that we have in the city at the moment. Does the officer go to the front door and knock, and just could you sort of run us through
the same process, regardless of this inspection program? The same process is undertaken. So the officer will approach and knock on the front door. They are required to still required to identify themselves, who they are, where they're from, what the purpose of of being on the property is, to that occupier of that property. So this doesn't change that. It just means that we've got the ability to go on the property without having their consent.
Councillor McMahon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wanted to make a comment if I could, and that's just to, I know this is a standard report, but absolutely applaud the work that Kevin and Jason, you guys do. And look, my phone rings at least once a week with both sides of this, either don't take my dog or can you get rid of that dog? And all of them I pathway onto you guys, and you do a tremendous job dealing with it. It's quite onerous to keep a dangerous or declared dog, and so it should be. But incidentally, I was with Councillor Summerfield at the Biosecurity Conference of South West Queensland, and the colleague from South Burnett was explaining that they have one person doing your job in the whole of South Burnett, and to hear that you're almost at a full staff in this section is really pleasing to hear, because there's a lot of people with dogs and we've got to get that done right. So just to say thank you for all the work. I very much appreciate, Jason. We don't talk much except on the back of various pathways, and it's really good to have you guys here and doing this. So thanks again.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. If there are any further questions in regards to this particular item, so I've got a mover in Councillor Carl, seconder in Councillor McMahon. Does anyone wish to enter debate in regards to this item? I'll put the vote. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Jason. And I think as echo those thoughts of everyone they said there, we know it's a balance between that sensitivity and also community safety and everything along those lines. So appreciate your work. Councillors, that does bring to a conclusion the Environment Community Committee for the month of September. We will break before moving into finance and business strategy. So, do we need a motion? No. No. So yeah. So that's the end of committee. So.
might get started shortly. So I welcome everyone to the Finance and Business Strategy Committee meeting, Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and also will be live streamed. I'd like to thank those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. Those present including the General Manager of Finance and Business, Anne-Marie Johnson, and the Manager of Governance and Legal Services, Bailey Garcher. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first peoples. Next item is the attendance, including any apologies, leave of absence and declarations of conflict of interest. Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Mr Chair. I do have a declaration to be made. It refers to item number 4, the reappointment of the Chairman of the Board of the Empire Theatres Proprietary Limited. And I refer to a declaration of declarable conflict of interest made at the ordinary meeting of Council on the 17th of August 2021 in relation to the then item number 6, confidential reappointment of the Chairman of onto the Board of the Empire Theatres, Pty Ltd, at the Finance and Business Strategy Committee meeting on the 11th of August of 2021, and of Council's decision to allow me to participate in the decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter. And as the relevant details or circumstances have not changed, I'll stay and participate in a decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. The next item is one in requiring us to go into confidential. So we need a motion that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 254J3 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to consider the following items on the agenda. First one being the review of the Empire Theatres Pty Ltd and Toowoomba and Surat Basin Enterprises Pty Ltd director process. And the reason for the closed meeting is that this report discusses the review of the Empire Theatres Pty Ltd and Toowoomba and Surat Basin Enterprise Pty Ltd director process, and therefore it is recommended that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 254J3E, being legal advice obtained by the local government or legal proceedings involving the local government, including, for example, legal proceedings that may be taken by or against the local government of Local Government Regulations 2012. And the next one, item number 5, will be the reappointment of the Chairman of the Board of the Empire Theatres Pty Ltd. And the reason for the closed meeting is that this report considers the reappointment of the current Chairman for a further 2 years, commencing 25th of October 2023, and it is therefore recommended that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 254J3F, being matters that may directly affect the health and safety of an individual or a group of individuals of Local Government Regulation 2012. So could I have a mover that we go into confidential, please?
Chair, could I ask a question,
Yeah,
please?
sure.
Thank you. So with the first report, which is the review of Empire and Tisby director process, is there a reason that, I mean, that in itself isn't a reason to go into confidential, is it?
I'll pass over to Bailey to...
Section 254J3E, legal advice obtained. So I'm going to, the document hasn't been reviewed since 2006. So I'm going to give you some legal advice on the document that we've enacted in 2006 and legal advice where we should go forward.
So I'm just wondering, does legal advice have to be in confidential, does it? I mean, we shouldn't, could you just elaborate on why legal advice would be confidential, please?
Just the council's position.
Are you happy with, well, not happy, but nothing further to add?
No, I'll leave it at that and following the discussions. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a move of Carol, Councillor Carroll, any seconder? Councillor Rebecca. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Have you got the draft?
Where's those?
Thank you. The resolutions or the motions to be considered, the first one is that the Chief Executive Officer provides to Council by May 2024 a report including a detailed draft constitution for Empire Theatres Pty Ltd, which includes Council's rights to appoint directors for Empire Theatres Pty Ltd. 2, that the Chief Executive Officer provides to Council by May 2024 a report including a detailed review of the constitution for Toowoomba and Surat Basin Enterprises Pty Ltd. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor McDonald, Councillor Bill. Although any discussion or going to debate in relation to the matter? If not, I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. The next motion will come up shortly. The motion is that the council reappoint Mr. Andrew Weiland to the position of Chairman of the Board of Empire Theatres Pty Ltd for a term of 2 years from the 25th of October 2023. Can I have a mover of that motion? Thanks. Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, seconded Councillor Bothoff. Any discussion? Move the motion. I'll put the motion that, sorry, Councillor Carroll? Okay. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. That then concludes the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.
Councillors, welcome to the Economic Development meeting for September committee meeting, acknowledging CEO Brian and all councillors present today and of course those all watching online. Councillors, we have no items today for the Economic Development Committee. However, there is plenty happening in this space, and just wanting to highlight, and Councillor James, you mentioned earlier about Carnival of Flowers, of course the economic impact for that right across our region, particularly for small business, is of great value. We also have visitation from our sister cities, Pardew, our sister city, and also visits from Singapore Gardens by the Bay for Carnival of Flowers. So it gives us an opportunity as councillors and the community to see some strength in those partnerships going forward, and particularly around that economic base as well. So councillors, that does conclude the meeting for economic development, and can you take that? We're just shifting something off screen. Okay, thank you. So councillors, thanks for your attendance. That concludes the committee meetings for today. Thank you very much.